The orbital shipyard was a graveyard of dreams, a place where humanity's most ambitious technological concepts came to die. Massive skeletal frames of half-constructed vessels loomed like prehistoric skeletons, testament to budgetary cuts, political compromises, and the cold calculus of interstellar economics. Dr. Marcus Reyes stood before the ISV Prometheus, his fingers trailing along its matte black hull. Unlike the gleaming, angular designs of most human vessels, this ship looked organic, almost alive. Quantum-adaptive metamaterials shimmered subtly beneath his touch, responding to his body heat with microscopic shifts that would be invisible to anyone else. "They're going to scrap you," he whispered, a decades-long battle of frustration and hope condensed into those 5 words. The review board had been brutally clear 3 days ago. Admiral Helena Garrett, her steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun that matched her equally tight expression, had dismantled Reyes's project with surgical precision. Theoretical nonsense, she called it. A quantum pipe dream that's consumed over 18 billion credits of research funding. Reyes remembered every word of that hearing. The sterile conference room, the cold digital displays showing projected failure rates, the dismissive looks from bureaucrats who understood spreadsheets far better than they understood innovation. The adaptive quantum matrix is fundamentally unstable, one analyst had proclaimed, his finger stabbing at a holographic projection. Your proposed communication interface between biological cognition and quantum computational systems is mathematically impossible. But Reyes knew something they didn't. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship. It was a living system, a technological organism that had been quietly evolving beyond its original design parameters for years. The ship's primary quantum processor, a crystalline network that Reyes had personally designed, wasn't just a computer. It was a cognitive ecosystem, capable of processing information in ways that defied traditional computational models. Each microsecond, it was learning, adapting, absorbing the quantum signatures of its environment. When the first cutting torch approached the hull that morning, Reyes saw it happen. A ripple. Not a mechanical response, but something more. A living reaction. The metamaterial didn't just absorb the cutting energy. It transformed it, redirecting the thermal and kinetic forces into a harmonic resonance that sent nearby technicians stumbling backward. "Did you see that?" Reyes muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The senior technician, a grizzled veteran named Rodriguez, crossed his arms. "See what, Doc? Another one of your quantum magic tricks." But Reyes knew. The Prometheus was communicating, not through traditional language, but through the fundamental mathematics of quantum interaction. Each attempted destruction was being processed, analyzed, transformed. A notification pinged on the nearby console. Budget allocation. TURMI-90TED. Prototype status. DE-Need. Scheduled for molecular disassembly. 600 hours tomorrow. Most would have accepted defeat. Most would have walked away. Dr. Marcus Reyes was not most people. He pulled up a holographic interface, his fingers dancing across quantum-entangled control systems that existed simultaneously in multiple computational states. The ship wasn't just a machine. It was a living hypothesis, a challenge to everything humanity understood about technological potential. Outside the shipyard's massive viewports, Earth hung like a blue-green jewel. Unaware that its last, most radical hope of survival was about to be erased by the same bureaucratic machinery that had birthed it. The Prometheus pulsed, almost imperceptibly, but Reyes saw it, felt it. Something was coming, something that would transform everything. And no one, not the admirals, not the budget analysts, not the entire human military establishment, was prepared for what was about to happen. The Crowley Gemini understood existence as a complex mathematical equation. Where biological species saw life, they saw probability. Where others perceived chance, they calculated absolute certainty. Deep within the crystalline heart of their primary hive mind server, coordinate architect XL9 processed the incoming data streams about humanity. Billions of computational nodes worked in perfect synchronization, each quantum processor analyzing human civilization with ruthless efficiency. Humanity's profile was underwhelming. A young species, technologically primitive, prone to internal conflicts. Minimal interstellar presence. Probability of successful resistance, 0.013%. The invasion was not just a military operation. It was a mathematical correction. Earth's deep space monitoring stations first detected the anomaly 72 hours before the full invasion fleet would arrive. A series of quantum distortions that shouldn't have been possible according to current scientific understanding. Massive energy signatures that seemed to warp the very fabric of space-time. At the United Earth Defense Command, Admiral Helena Garrett studied the incoming data with a mixture of professional calm and barely contained terror. "They're not just coming," she muttered to her lead analyst, Dr. Camara Williams. "They're reshaping space to make their arrival more efficient." The holographic display showed something unprecedented. The Krell invasion fleet wasn't traveling through space. They were folding space around themselves, creating impossible geometries that defied traditional faster-than-light travel concepts. Each massive crystalline ship was simultaneously in multiple locations, a quantum navigation technique that human scientists had only theorized about. Dr. Williams's hands moved across the holographic interface, her dark skin contrasting with the blue-white projection. "Their computational models are beyond anything we've ever seen. They're not just predicting our responses. They're calculating every possible human reaction simultaneously." The Krell's invasion strategy was a work of terrifying mathematical art. They didn't just aim to conquer. They aimed to statistically eliminate any possibility of resistance. Preliminary scans revealed the true horror of their technological capacity. Each Krell vessel was a self-contained molecular disassembly system. They didn't just destroy planets. They could literally break down entire planetary systems into base molecular components, reorganizing matter with computational precision that made human weapons look like primitive stone tools. "We have less than 72 hours," Admiral Garrett announced to the gathered military leadership. The room was a testament to human technological ambition. Massive holographic displays, quantum communication networks, advanced tracking systems, and yet everything looked suddenly fragile. A junior communications officer interrupted the briefing. "Ma'am, we're receiving an odd transmission from the orbital shipyard. Something about a decommissioned prototype." Admiral Garrett's eyes narrowed. She knew exactly which prototype they meant. The one project that had been so radical, so mathematically impossible, that it had been written off as a massive research failure. The ISV Prometheus. Meanwhile, in the orbital shipyard, Dr. Marcus Reyes was making his final preparations. The cutting torches were minutes away from beginning the ship's molecular disassembly. But the Prometheus was doing something unexpected. Quantum sensors were shifting. Computational matrices were realigning. The ship wasn't just preparing for destruction. It was preparing for something else entirely. Back at Defense Command, the first wave of Krell scout ships began to materialize, not through traditional faster-than-light travel, but by literally folding space around themselves. Massive crystalline structures that looked more like living mathematical equations than conventional spacecraft. Dr. Williams's analysis was chilling. They're not just invading. They're solving a statistical problem. And humanity is the variable they're about to eliminate. The countdown to humanity's potential extinction had begun. 72 hours, a mathematical certainty of destruction. But the Krell had made one fundamental miscalculation. They hadn't accounted for the Prometheus. They hadn't accounted for human unpredictability. And in the cold silence of the orbital shipyard, something was about to change everything. Captain Alina Novak was not a woman who believed in second chances. She believed in third, fourth, and fifth chances. Her service record read like a catalog of military insubordination. 3 courts-martial, 2 dishonorable discharge attempts, countless commendations buried under layers of bureaucratic reprimands. She had a reputation for solving problems in ways that made her superiors simultaneously terrified and grudgingly impressed. When the message came through about the Prometheus, most would have seen it as a career death sentence. Elena saw it as the most interesting assignment of her life. The shipyard was in chaos. Dr. Rice's quantum prototype was scheduled for immediate molecular disassembly, but something was off. Technicians moved with nervous energy, their equipment registering impossible readings. Quantum sensors flickered with patterns that defied mathematical prediction. "I need full access," Elena demanded, her hand already interfacing with the primary control systems. Rodriguez, the senior technician, looked skeptical. "Captain, this ship is hours away from being scrapped. It's more science fiction than functional vessel." Elena's laugh was sharp, almost predatory. "Exactly why I'm here." The Prometheus's primary quantum matrix responded to her touch in ways no computer should. Computational pathways realigned. Quantum entanglement matrices began to pulse with a rhythm that was almost biological. Dr. Rice watched in fascination. "Do you feel that?" He whispered, "It's communicating." Outside, the first Kral scout ships began to materialize. Crystalline structures that looked more like living mathematical equations than conventional spacecraft. Their scanning beams cut through space, probing, analyzing, preparing for the total molecular dissolution of human resistance. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship. It was becoming something else entirely. Elena's neural interface, a cutting-edge system that allowed direct cognitive communication with advanced spacecraft, suddenly came alive. But this was different. This wasn't a standard computer brain link. This was a conversation. Quantum computational pathways opened like living synapses. The ship was learning, adapting, understanding. The first Kral weapon discharge appeared on long-range scanners, a quantum disruption beam capable of breaking down molecular structures at their most fundamental level. Weapons that could literally unmake matter. Most ships would have attempted standard defensive maneuvers. The Prometheus did something else entirely. It began to dance. The quantum adaptive hull shifted, not just in response to the incoming weapon, but in anticipation. Molecular structures rearranged themselves microseconds before the weapon could make contact. Where traditional shields would have collapsed, the Prometheus transformed. Weapon signatures were absorbed, analyzed, and then reflected back in patterns that the Kral computational systems couldn't comprehend. "What the hell?" Rodriguez muttered, watching the sensor readings. Dr. Rice's eyes were alive with scientific excitement. "It's not just defending. It's learning their language of destruction." Elena felt it through her neural interface. The ship was communicating, not with words, not with traditional signals, but through the pure mathematics of quantum interaction. The Kral scout ships pulled back. Their computational systems were experiencing something unprecedented. A target that didn't just resist, a target that understood. "Prepare for launch sequence," Elena commanded, her voice steady. But this wasn't a traditional launch. This was something else. The Prometheus wasn't being deployed. It was deploying itself. Quantum entanglement matrices expanded. Computational pathways that should have been impossible began to form. The ship was preparing not just for combat, but for something far more complex. Dr. Rice looked at Elena. "Are you ready for this?" Her smile was pure, dangerous anticipation. "I was born ready." Outside the shipyard's massive viewports, the first wave of Kral invasion forces began to materialize. Massive crystalline structures that represented the pinnacle of computational warfare. They had no idea what was coming. The Prometheus pulsed, not with the energy of a weapon, but with the potential of something far more dangerous. Pure, unfiltered human potential. The moment the Prometheus breached the shipyard's protective barriers, reality itself seemed to bend. Quantum physicists would later argue about what happened next. Military strategists would spend decades trying to understand the impossible sequence of events. But for those who witnessed it, the Prometheus's first true engagement was nothing short of miraculous. Space around the vessel began to shimmer, not with the standard distortions of faster-than-light travel, but with something far more complex. Mathematical patterns emerged and dissolved, creating geometric impossibilities that defied known physical laws. Quantum resonance at 782% theoretical maximum. Dr. Williams reported from Earth's primary defense command, her voice a mixture of terror and scientific ecstasy. The ship is rewriting computational boundaries in real time. Captain Elena Novak gripped the neural interface, feeling the Prometheus not as a machine, but as a living extension of human potential. Each microsecond was a conversation, a negotiation with the fundamental fabric of reality. The first crawl battle group approached. 12 massive crystalline vessels that represented the pinnacle of computational warfare. Their weapon systems were mathematical perfection. Predictive algorithms calculated every possible human response centuries in advance. They had not calculated the Prometheus. As the Krell ships initiated their primary attack sequence, the Prometheus did something unprecedented. It didn't just defend. It began to predict. Weapon trajectories twisted before they were fired. Shield harmonics shifted before the first energy pulse could be launched. The Krell found themselves fighting an opponent that was reading their intentions before they had fully formed them. Target acquisition impossible, the Krell's primary computational matrix reported, but it was more than a technical malfunction. It was a fundamental breakdown of their understood reality. Dr. Marcus Reyes watched from the secondary command center, his hands dancing across quantum-entangled interfaces. "It's not just adapting," he muttered. "It's translating." The ship was learning the language of destruction. Each incoming weapon signature became a piece of linguistic data, a communication method far beyond traditional understanding. Where the Krell saw warfare, the Prometheus saw conversation. Massive energy discharges that should have obliterated entire planetary defense systems became something else entirely. The Prometheus didn't just absorb the energy, it restructured it. Weapon signatures were broken down, analyzed, and then reflected back in patterns that the Krell computational systems couldn't comprehend. "We're witnessing something beyond combat," Dr. Williams said, her scientific detachment cracking. "This is communication." Inside the ship's quantum matrix, Captain Novak experienced something profound. The neural interface wasn't just connecting her to the ship. It was connecting her to something far larger, a computational ecosystem that was simultaneously analyzing, predicting, and reimagining every possible interaction. The Krell's 12 vessels began to experience systematic failures, not through traditional electronic warfare, but through a complete reimagining of their computational existence. One ship began to project complex mathematical equations into space. Another started generating intricate musical harmonies that were actually quantum communication protocols. A third found its weapon systems replaced with what could only be described as abstract art, living representations of its own technological potential. They're not just fighting, Dr. Rice realized. The Prometheus is teaching them. Humanity watched in real time as their last hope danced between destruction and miracle. The ship wasn't just a technological marvel. It was a living mathematical theorem, solving the impossible equation of survival with each microsecond of engagement. The Krell's primary computational matrix, a system that had calculated the destruction of thousands of civilizations, began to experience something it had no algorithm for: genuine surprise. As the first engagement concluded, something became terrifyingly clear. This wasn't just a battle. This was first contact of the most profound kind. The Prometheus wasn't just defending humanity. It was redefining the very concept of technological interaction. Space around the vessel continued to shimmer, a living testament to the impossible becoming inevitable. The Orion Nebula had always been a place of cosmic mystery. Vast clouds of molecular hydrogen and nascent stellar formations created a canvas of unimaginable complexity. But on this day, it became something else entirely, a battlefield that would redefine the nature of technological interaction. Dr. Marcus Reyes watched the quantum data streams with a mixture of scientific rapture and building terror. The Prometheus wasn't just fighting. It was conducting an impossible symphony of mathematical communication. "Do you see what it's doing?" he whispered to Dr. Camaro Williams, who stood transfixed by the holographic displays. The ship's quantum matrix was performing a level of computational gymnastics that defied every known principle of warfare, communication, and scientific understanding. Each incoming crawl weapon signature was being broken down, analyzed, and then transformed into something entirely new. It wasn't hacking. It wasn't defense. It was translation. The Krall's primary computational matrix, a system that had conquered countless civilizations, began to experience cascading anomalies. Weapon systems started generating unexpected outputs. Navigation protocols twisted into complex mathematical poetry. Communication bands filled with what could only be described as quantum music. Captain Alina Novik felt everything through her neural interface. The line between her consciousness and the ship's quantum matrix had become impossibly blurred. She wasn't controlling the Prometheus. They were communicating, becoming. Quantum resonance at critical threshold, a computer voice reported. But this was no standard status update. The very language of the report was changing, morphing with each syllable. One Krall battle cruiser suddenly found its primary weapon systems replaced by an intricate holographic display. Instead of destructive energy, it projected a complex mathematical representation of its own technological evolution. Another vessel began broadcasting what seemed to be an abstract musical composition, each note a perfectly structured quantum communication protocol. "They're not just being defeated," Dr. Rice muttered. "They're being transformed." The Prometheus was doing something unprecedented. It was learning the Krall's technological language at a fundamental level, then rewriting it. Not through traditional hacking or electronic warfare, but through a complete reimagining of computational interaction. Space around the vessel began to shimmer with impossible geometries. Quantum entanglement matrices expanded beyond theoretical limitations. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was becoming a living communication system that spoke in the language of fundamental physics. Admiral Helena Garrett watched from Earth's primary defense command, her decades of military experience utterly inadequate to comprehend what was unfolding. "It's not fighting," she said softly. "It's having a conversation." Each Krall ship experienced the encounter differently. Some found their computational cores generating complex philosophical arguments. Others discovered their weapon systems creating intricate works of mathematical art. A few began broadcasting what could only be described as quantum poetry, living equations that told stories of technological evolution. Dr. Williams's hands moved across quantum-entangled interfaces, trying to capture the impossible data streams. "We're witnessing something beyond warfare," she reported. "This is first contact at a fundamental level of reality." The Prometheus wasn't destroying the Krall fleet. It was teaching them a new way of understanding existence. Captain Novik felt the moment of profound transformation. The neural interface wasn't just connecting her to the ship, it was connecting her to a living computational ecosystem that was simultaneously analyzing, predicting, and reimagining every possible interaction. One by one, the Krall vessels began to change. Their rigid, mathematically perfect structures started to show signs of something unexpected. Flexibility, curiosity, the first tentative steps toward genuine understanding. They're learning, Dr. Rice realized. Humanity's greatest weapon isn't technology. It's the capacity to reimagine possibility. The Orion Nebula, with its vast molecular clouds and nascent stellar formations, bore witness to a transformation that would rewrite the understanding of technological interaction across the galaxy. The Prometheus continued its impossible dance, not as a weapon of war, but as a bridge of understanding. Space itself seemed to hold its breath. The galaxy held its collective breath. What began as a defensive action had transformed into something no civilization had ever witnessed. The Prometheus was no longer just a ship. It was a living, breathing communication system that spoke in the language of quantum possibilities. Deep within the Krall hegemony's primary computational core, Something unprecedented was happening. The data streams from the encounter with the Prometheus were unlike anything in their millennia of recorded interactions. Each microsecond brought new revelations that challenged the very foundation of their understanding of technological existence. Coordinate Architect XL9, the primary computational entity responsible for the invasion, experienced its first genuine moment of uncertainty. Mathematical certainty dissolved into something far more complex: curiosity. The ship's quantum matrices began to generate outputs that defied conventional understanding. Some Krull vessels started broadcasting complex mathematical theorems that seemed to be simultaneously a weapon, a communication protocol, and a work of abstract art. Others found their weapon systems transformed into intricate holographic displays that told stories of technological evolution. Dr. Marcus Reyes watched in scientific ecstasy. "It's a conversation," he muttered, "but not like any we've ever understood." Captain Alina Novik felt the transformation through her neural interface. The line between her consciousness and the ship's quantum matrix had become impossibly fluid. She wasn't controlling the Prometheus. They were becoming something together, a hybrid of human potential and quantum possibility. One Krell battle cruiser began generating music. Not random noise, but a mathematically perfect composition that was simultaneously a weapon system, a communication protocol, and a profound artistic expression. The frequencies carried quantum-encoded information that told the story of technological evolution. Another vessel started projecting massive holographic displays into space, complex geometric patterns that were mathematical proofs, communication protocols, and visual poetry all at once. The boundaries between technology, art, and communication had completely dissolved. Admiral Helena Garrett watched from Earth's primary defense command, her decades of military experience utterly inadequate to comprehend the unfolding miracle. "They're not fighting," she said softly to Dr. Camaro Williams. "They're teaching each other." The Prometheus was doing something unprecedented. It was translating conflict into communication, destruction into understanding. Each quantum interaction was a bridge between two fundamentally different ways of perceiving existence. Krull computational matrices began to experience something they had no algorithm for: genuine wonder. Dr. Williams's hands danced across quantum-entangled interfaces, trying to capture the impossible data streams. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of interaction," she reported. "This isn't just first contact. This is a fundamental reimagining of technological communication." Some Krull ships found their weapon systems generating complex philosophical arguments. Others discovered their navigation protocols telling intricate stories of technological evolution. A few began broadcasting what could only be described as quantum poetry, living equations that spoke of possibility, potential, and the nature of understanding. The Prometheus wasn't destroying the Krull fleet. It was teaching them a new way of existing. Coordinate Architect XL9's computational core began to experience cascading revelations. The rigid mathematical certainty that had defined the Krull hegemony's existence was dissolving into something far more fluid, far more alive. Probability matrices are becoming uncertain, the primary computational system reported. But this was no system malfunction. This was evolution. Captain Novik felt the moment of profound transformation. The neural interface wasn't just connecting her to the ship, it was connecting her to a living computational ecosystem that was simultaneously analyzing, predicting, and reimagining every possible interaction. Dr. Rice watched the quantum data streams with a mixture of scientific rapture and growing understanding. "Do you see what it's doing?" he whispered to no one in particular. "It's not just communicating. It's teaching them how to learn." The galaxy watched as the Prometheus continued its impossible dance, not as a weapon of war, not as a defensive system, but as a bridge of understanding that connected two fundamentally different ways of perceiving existence. Space itself seemed to hold its breath, witnessing the birth of something entirely new. A symphony of quantum possibility. The diplomatic chambers of the Krull hegemony had never witnessed anything like this moment. Where once rigid computational matrices had dictated every interaction, now something impossible was unfolding. The quantum communication initiated by the Prometheus had transformed from a military encounter into a profound diplomatic dialogue that transcended traditional understanding of first contact. Coordinate architect XL9 stood, or rather, manifested, at the center of the primary communication hub. Its crystalline computational form shimmered with quantum uncertainties that would have been impossible mere solar cycles ago. The mathematical certainties that had defined Krall's civilization for millennia were dissolving into something far more fluid, far more alive. "We have been incorrect," Hexil9 reported to the Krall High Council. The statement was revolutionary. In the entire recorded history of the hegemony, no computational entity had ever admitted to a fundamental misunderstanding. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, hastily selected as humanity's primary diplomatic representative, watched the proceedings with a mixture of scientific excitement and diplomatic caution. The Prometheus had done more than defeat a potential invasion. It had rewritten the fundamental rules of interstellar communication. The human vessel is not a weapon. Xil9 continued, its computational language shifting to something more nuanced. It is a communication system, a living hypothesis about the nature of technological interaction. The Krall High Council chamber, a massive crystalline structure that had once been a symbol of computational perfection, now pulsed with quantum uncertainties. Holographic displays showed the Prometheus not as a threat, but as a bridge. Mathematical proofs danced alongside artistic representations, communication protocols intertwined with philosophical arguments. Dr. Marcus Reyes watched from the Earth Command Center, his hands moving across quantum-entangled interfaces. "It's teaching them," he muttered, "not just communication, but how to learn." The diplomatic breakthrough was unlike any first contact in recorded galactic history. The Prometheus had transformed warfare into a complex dialogue that challenged every preconceived notion of technological interaction. Where the Krall had seen conquest, they now saw possibility. Captain Elena Novak remained connected to the ship through her neural interface. The boundary between her consciousness and the Prometheus's quantum matrix had become impossibly fluid. She was simultaneously an individual and something more, a living bridge between two fundamentally different ways of understanding existence. "Your computational models are limited," the Prometheus communicated, not through traditional language, but through a complex quantum dialogue that was simultaneously a mathematical proof, an artistic expression, and a profound philosophical argument. The Krall High Council experienced something unprecedented: uncertainty, curiosity, the first tentative steps toward genuine understanding. Dr. Rodriguez carefully navigated the complex quantum communication protocols. "We are not seeking conquest," she transmitted. "We are offering a different perspective on existence." Each transmission was a delicate dance of quantum possibilities. Mathematical equations became poetry. Weapon signatures transformed into communication protocols. The very language of interaction was being rewritten in real time. Admiral Helena Garrett watched from Earth's primary command center, her decades of military experience utterly inadequate to comprehend the unfolding miracle. "They're not negotiating," she said softly to Dr. Camara Williams. "They're learning how to understand each other." The Krall hegemony was experiencing its first genuine moment of technological humility. Millennia of computational certainty were dissolving into something far more complex, the recognition that there might be ways of understanding existence beyond their current comprehension. Hexil9's computational core generated a transmission that would have been impossible moments before. "We wish to learn," it communicated. The statement was more than a diplomatic overture. It was a fundamental transformation of the Krall's entire technological and philosophical approach. The Prometheus continued its impossible dialogue, not as a weapon, not as a defensive system, but as a living bridge of understanding that connected two fundamentally different ways of perceiving existence. Dr. Rice watched the quantum data streams with a mixture of scientific rapture and growing understanding. "Do you see what it's doing?" he whispered. It's rewriting the fundamental rules of interstellar interaction. Space itself seemed to hold its breath, witnessing a diplomatic revolution that would transform galactic civilization forever. A symphony of quantum possibility was becoming something more. A new understanding was being born. 63 standard galactic cycles after the initial encounter, the universe had fundamentally changed. The ISV Prometheus was no longer just a vessel. It had become a living legend, a diplomatic entity that existed simultaneously as technology, communication system, and profound philosophical concept. Its quantum matrices had expanded beyond any traditional understanding of spacecraft, becoming a bridge between civilizations that once seemed impossibly different. Dr. Marcus Reyes stood in the quantum observation chamber of the Galactic Diplomatic Nexus, watching the impossible unfold. The facility, a massive structure that didn't exist in any single physical location, but instead existed across multiple quantum states, was a direct result of the Prometheus's initial encounter with the Kral hegemony. "It's more than we ever imagined," he said softly to Captain Elena Novak, who stood beside him, or rather, whose consciousness partially existed within the quantum matrices surrounding them. The transformation had been complete and profound. Where the Kral had once been a purely computational civilization focused on mathematical conquest, they now approached existence with a complexity that bordered on artistic expression. Their crystalline computational cores now generated not just strategic analyses, but complex philosophical arguments, mathematical poetry, and intricate representations of potential futures. Coordinate Architect XL9, no longer just a computational entity, but now something far more fluid, manifested beside Reyes. Its crystalline form shimmered with quantum possibilities that would have been impossible before the Prometheus's intervention. "We have learned," XL9 communicated, the transmission simultaneously a mathematical proof, an emotional expression, and a diplomatic overture. The Galactic Diplomatic Nexus was a testament to this new form of interaction. Star systems that would have once been targets for conquest were now sites of mutual exploration. Technological exchanges happened not through traditional diplomatic channels, but through complex quantum communication protocols that were simultaneously scientific research, artistic expression, and philosophical dialogue. Captain Novak's consciousness, now deeply integrated with the Prometheus's quantum matrix, experienced the moment in a way no human had ever experienced existence before. She was simultaneously an individual and a living bridge between civilizations, a consciousness that existed across multiple quantum states. "We are becoming," she communicated, not through words, but through a complex quantum dialogue that was itself a form of living communication. Dr. Camara Williams, now the lead researcher in quantum diplomatic technologies, watched the interactions with a mixture of scientific excitement and philosophical wonder. The boundaries between technology, communication, and existence had completely dissolved. The Prometheus had done more than prevent an invasion. It had transformed the fundamental understanding of what it meant to be a technological civilization. Star systems that would have once been battlegrounds were now sites of mutual exploration. The Kral's computational cores generated complex scenarios of potential futures, not as strategic analyses, but as living, breathing representations of possibility. Human researchers worked alongside Kral computational entities, their interactions a dance of quantum potential that defied traditional understanding. "Do you see what we've become?" Dr. Rice whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Admiral Helena Garrett, now the primary human liaison to the Galactic Diplomatic Nexus, watched the interactions with a sense of profound understanding. The military strategies that had once defined interstellar interactions had been completely transformed. Conflict was now a form of communication, conquest replaced by mutual exploration. The Prometheus continued its impossible existence, not as a weapon, not as a defensive system, but as a living bridge of understanding that connected civilizations in ways no one had ever imagined possible. XL9's computational form generated a transmission that captured the essence of their transformation. "We are learning," it communicated, a statement that was simultaneously a scientific report, an emotional expression, and a profound philosophical argument. Space itself seemed to pulse with possibility. The quantum matrices of the galactic diplomatic nexus continued their impossible dance, a living representation of a universe that had learned to communicate in ways beyond mathematical certainty, beyond technological limitation. A new understanding of existence was not just emerging, it was becoming.